and welcome to Surviving and Growing in a Slow Economy seminar. My name is Salesh Chen. I'm a chartered accountant in public practice, and today we'll be talking for about 60 to 90 minutes, depending on the feedback we get from you. We'll try our best to make the presentation entertaining. As a quick background about me or who I am, and most of you probably know who I am, I'm a chartered accountant in public practice. I'm also a partner here at GRA. I have about 18 years of experience in property and business accounting. Um, Currently in my portfolio, I have over 60 whole property portfolios, and I've got about another 10 houses that we're in the process of building. So, something that I've always liked doing is property investing. Um, I also help a lot of businesses with their growth and their expansion and their structure. So I help with businesses, and I look after a lot of businesses as well, in Auckland and around the country. One of my specialist area is that I do a lot of insolvency work with creditors, trying to make sure that they get paid if businesses are struggling, and also to ensure that IID gets paid as well. So we negotiate a settlement with the IID. And if you do have ID issues, we can help you in that matter. Now, before we move any further, I just want to clarify that we are chartered accountants. We are not financial advisors, and we will never give you any financial advice. On that basis, I'll just wait for 5 seconds while you read this disclaimer. If you've got any concerns about us giving any financial advice, please email us and we'll make sure we get back to you and justify our reasoning, because there won't be any financial advice. Um, this evening, we'll be talking about cost and cash flow. I know a lot of business out there are struggling with cash flow, and especially with cost increasing. We'll also talk about AI and the threat and what's happening to NZ businesses. AI is a very good tool, and businesses should be using them. And we'll also talk about finding clients, who they are, and what you need to look out for, and growing your revenue. Hiring and keeping good people. This is really important. If you do have good people, you want to look after them. And lastly, we'll talk about your bank. Now, banks are very important people. They are your bloodline in your business. They provide you cash flow. They provide you banking facilities so your clients can pay in there and you can withdraw funds out of the banking facilities. They provide you overdraft facilities when you need it. So they are actually your business partners, and you are married to your bank, whichever way you look at it. And before I move any further, I want to introduce you to Anthony Strevens. He's decided to present with us today. Oh, young Anthony. You can see in the photo there when he was young, about 20 years ago, with his beautiful shirt. Anthony, do you want to tell us who you are and what do you get up to? Anthony is our business partner here.
Cool. Thanks, Sal, and hello to everyone. Great to have you all with us. It is a great shirt, and that photo was maybe about 10 years ago, I reckon, not quite 20. But I'm definitely due for some updated glamour shots for our marketing and website, that's for sure. So, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Anthony Strevens, and I'm a chartered accountant and a partner here at GRA. And I've been with GRA a bit over 15 years now, out of a total career span of just over 20. My role here at GRA as a director and partner is essentially in the business advisory team, so much the same as Salesh. And so I help my clients with advice around how your business and your property, your family assets all fit together, how to structure effectively for tax, how to make sure the structure is working for you rather than against you, and especially in an economic environment like this one. The other thing I'd mention, I suppose, is that I've worked with clients across a lot of different industries, trades, hospitality, professional services, construction, property. And the interesting thing right now is that everyone's facing the same issues in terms of a tight economy, which is exactly what tonight is all about. And so with that, let's get into it. So back to you, Sal.
Yeah. And also, Anthony does a lot of work with IID as well, similar to what I do. We do a lot of negotiations and ensuring the IID gets maximum recovery and the client is secured as well. And one of the skills that Anthony and I have is, if you are in any sort of trouble in your business, or your business is in trouble, we protect your family home as a starting point. That's very important for us, that a client's family home is always protected. So if you ever get a lawyer telling you that trust is not important, I would
Mm.
like to talk to that lawyer, because the first thing you need to ask that lawyer is, have you ever done litigation? Have you attended
Yeah.
to any sort of litigation? If they go no, do not take advice from them, right? Um, so this is just a generic overview of what we do at Gillingham Rowe. It's actually quite a specialist accounting firm, and Anthony and I understand all parts of what we do at GRA. We start off with tax advisory work, where we do bespoke tax advice for you. We look at asset protection. At the same time, we look at the most efficient tax structure for you. All our work is peer reviewed, maybe two times or third time, to make sure we are within the law and make sure we are doing the right thing by the client. Then we have business advisory services. This is where you have your accountants doing your compliance work to make sure you are up to date with IID. This is a very important role, compliance work, because if you don't file your PAYE returns, that's criminal. You could face criminal prosecution from IID. So our job is to make sure that our clients are compliant. And then we do introduce you to insurance brokers. Now, the reason we can't do insurance is because we're not financial advisors, but we know insurance companies that you can work with, and we'll introduce you to them. Also, mortgage broking. Now, we can introduce you to mortgage brokers. We can't do mortgage broking, but we can help the mortgage brokers in terms of the structure of the loans and what we are trying to achieve. We also have our property education, which is what you're listening to now. It's similar, this is a business presentation. We do property education where we have a lot of clients who like to park their earnings, so either from PAYE or from the business profit into properties, right? And this is actually quite important information, because most clients who park their money into properties, they actually do quite well when there's a recession. They can either refinance and get their capital out, or they can sell the property and release funds out. So we see property investing as like a forced savings scenario, where you buy properties on loan and you focus on paying the debt down over time. And then your asset planning. This is where we look at protecting your business. If your business is doing amazing, we look at protecting your business. If your business is struggling, we look at protecting all your assets first, and then we have to ensure your family is protected as well. So we provide that kind of services. So this is the stuff we can do at GRA. Now, obviously, if there's something here you're looking for, if you're looking for something that's not over here, you can ask us, and we can probably guide you through as to who to talk to. Now, guys, I'd like to thank, we've got about just over 40 viewers today. I'd like to thank you for your time, and coming and listening to us. And one thing that I always like to talk about is, if you do want a meeting with us, this is anyone who's new to GRA, it's free. You just scan that QR code and fill out the form, and your Amy will get hold of you tomorrow. Now, if you are an existing GRA client and you need us to do a review with you, that's including your business review, or if you are in some sort of trouble with your business, you need a second opinion, we're happy to help you with that. Now, we can do that work for about 250 plus GST for an hour. Now, normally that cost is 550, so I'm happy to give that away for 250 plus GST if you're listening to us today. Now, this is just to help you and guide you through, if you are, and if you are not in trouble, right? Everything is fine. That's where we want you to be at. You still want to do a review, we're happy to do that for you as well. So we can hold your hands and guide you through. Um, the things we talk about, asset protection, like we said, tax planning and advice and accounting services in our meetings. Um, we also look at creditors. If you've got creditors that needs to be negotiated with, we'll look at ways how we can do it. Now, in the event we can't do the work, we know who to refer you to. So that's very important to understand. Now, that's Amy's details there. If you need to know anything else, you flick an email to Amy. She'll organize the relevant information for you. Now, guys, we went down hunting for some data today as to what's happening out there and what's happening in 2026. Firstly, the saddest news is then our Reserve Bank decided to increase our interest rate in last week. I mean, how terrible is that? The economy is struggling. We've had the oil war, then we have had the Reserve Bank's putting the interest rate up for so long, which caused a nightmare for a lot of Kiwis and businesses. Now that the OCR is going up, it's forcing people to spend less money. As a result, we've got retail struggling, we've got construction business struggling. Then on the other hand, we've got inflation rate going through the roof. We've just come out with the new inflation rate at 3.9%. Now, the part of the reason inflation went up is because of the oil crisis. So it's not because of Kiwis out there spending money
Yeah,
willy-nilly. It wasn't nothing to do with that, right, Strevens?
that's right, Sal. It's imported inflation. So
Yes,
what's raising our OCR going to really do in order to stem inflation if it's coming in from offshore?
yes. And you can see how businesses and mum and dad or people, even single people are struggling. People are not going out. You can see restaurants are sitting empty. People just don't have that extra cash to spend. Then further to that is we've just had just over 3,023 companies put into liquidation up to March 2026. That's crazy. Those numbers are never heard of. And if you say each company employed 3,000 three people, that's 9,000 people out of employment. You know, this is actually quite sad news. That's 9,000 people spending less money in the economy or probably have gone back on benefit, because they can't find another job. Um, then, to add salt to the wound, is we got this $9.3 billion tax that businesses are behind on. Now, they're not behind on this tax just from one year. It doesn't build up. It's from prior years as well. And the reason we have companies behind on tax is because when COVID started, under the Labor government, they allowed companies to defer their provisional tax for a couple of years. As a result, when 2023 came, from 2021, 22, you could defer your provisional tax. 2023 came, a lot of companies ended up with massive tax obligations, which they couldn't keep up with. Because once people have money in the bank account, if we're talking about people or businesses, they spend the money. Most businesses went out there, they've bought new company cars, they went and bought a new building, all of that, and then suddenly you had 3 years tax to pay in one year. People can't afford that. I mean, as individuals, we can't afford it. So companies have the same problem. As a result, the tax have been deferred, deferred, deferred. Now the IRD doesn't buy into the story anymore. So they are forcing companies to go into liquidation if you're not able to pay your tax. They don't want to hear anything else. They force you into liquidation. So here's a quick graph to with exactly what's happening with liquidation. In 2023, we had about 1,800 companies in liquidation. 2024, it was about 2,500. Then 2025, it went up by 300, so 2,800 companies in liquidation. But the scariest part is suddenly went up to 3,000, right? These are some big increases we're seeing. So what's going to happen next year? And it's continuing to happen. Every day you read the news. I flew in on Friday night and I was reading the news on Saturday morning. Sterling Sports have gone into liquidation in Christchurch. I mean, that's one of the big brands that I grew up with. They've gone into liquidation, which is really scary. Another big brand was Bigger Bigger. They employed, I think, just over 100 people. They've gone into receivership. So this is quite scary for the economy, and it is quite sad. And the saddest part is what I'm not seeing out there is the current government is not making any effort to help. All they're doing is putting pressure on businesses that owed tax and forcing them into liquidation. Whereas I was in Malaysia and I was talking to my driver, and she said to me, I said, "What are some of the things the government do to help you and businesses?" She goes, "One of the things the government do is on the first 200 liters per month, every individual gets a 50% discount on fuel, and which is fantastic because that's probably what we use a month, 200 liters, and which is amazing for people to hear and to know that they're going to get a discount. Doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, everyone gets the discount. The government wants to be fair. So it is quite sad to see that we don't get the same backing from NZ government. I was talking to my friend in India. They've got a population of 1.4 billion. And he said to me, everyone there gets a fuel discount just to help keep the economy running because fuel is such a big cost. If you don't give people discount, your freight goes up, everything increases. So
We've got the opposite of discounts. We've got tariffs.
yes,
How much of the each liter of fuel is actually a tax? It's most of it, I
most
believe.
of it. Yeah. Well, something interesting someone said to me yesterday is the reason why the government is not helping with fuel prices is because as fuel prices increase, the government's income increases.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and they're enjoying this free ride, which is quite sad, and it's coming at the expense of, Kiwis who are working hard to pay bills, and obviously as a result, not only we're paying more for fuel, we're paying more for goods as well, because the cost of the good goes up. So we're getting hit by every angle we look at. So the hardest hit sectors over the last few years has been construction. Construction is number one. 768 companies put into liquidation up to March 2026, which is quite sad. When you look at construction companies going into liquidation, it's not only construction. What happens is when you got construction workers, they pay rent, on the way to work. They stop at service stations, they fill up the car, they buy coffee, they buy pies, and, it's just the flow on effect keeps going, and now they don't have a job. So they don't wake up in the morning, they don't fill up their service stations, they don't do anything, they don't stop at Bunnings. Bunnings is empty. Every time you go into Bunnings now, you got five people trying to help you because it's empty. Then you got hospitality, and I think most of the hospitality business are from Auckland, because or up north or North Island. The reason is, for some reason, tourists don't come here. They all seem to be going to South Island, and good on South Island for doing an amazing job to attract tourists. So most of this hospitality business is up, it's towards the North Island, and we are struggling. You look at businesses in Wellington. A lot of hospitality business have been shut down. Auckland, people don't go out. They just don't have the money. Tourists are not coming here to spend money. And so that's why we had nearly close to 400 of those businesses going to liquidation. Other services, about 174. And then we had automotive repair businesses. That's on a rise. Now, I was talking to Anthony about this earlier today. I said, I've got a very good friend who's into panel bidding. And he said to me, the last 18 months has been the hardest in automotive. And I said to him, why? He goes, the problem is most insurance companies are opening their own panel bedding business now. So when there's an accident, the work is referred to their own panel beaters, and you end up with an amazing courtesy car. And they're going to do an amazing job on your car because it's an insurance company. They're paying their own selves. So as a result, less work has been diverted to your normal panel beating shop. And also, people are traveling less. So my mate who's in panel beating said there's hardly people traveling during school holidays because of the fuel prices. People aren't traveling as much. So automotive industry is getting hit. And I was just reading the news on the Aussie market. There's a couple of big car brands are pulling out of the Aussie market. And they said there's brands like Mazda and Nissan is in trouble because there's new Chinese cars coming in. And to provide any sort of automotive service to them, they've got to go to their own suppliers. They can't just go to willy-nilly anyone in the market. So that's happening as well. But we thought it would be good to show you some of the business, how they're struggling and what's happening in the industry. Now, guys, this is our main topics for tonight. So we'll start off with the first one, your cost and cash flow, why margins are down and why you're feeling so squeezed. The first thing is your input cost and the energy shock, right? You look at basically the Middle East conflict, that's pushed your oil prices through the roof, that's pushed your freight through the roof. As a result, that cost is passed down to the end user, right? I've got a very, very good friend who imports about 30 containers a month. And he said to me the price of importing has doubled, even trying to get the containers in on time. And he imports things like, your paper cups and all of that. He said it's just going through the roof. He said they don't know how to control it. Which obviously then you sell it to your takeaway shops, and so as a result, the price of your takeaway goes up as well because everyone needs to pay higher prices. I'm talking to guys who bring building materials from overseas, and they're saying, look, we've got to put our price up 15, 20% a month at the moment because every time they import something, the cost of freight goes up. So it's coming, it's happening, and as a result, we are having to pay for it. Then you've got your wages, insurance, rates, and rent. Another article I was reading in the weekend. The Auckland Council has voted for another massive increase in rates. I don't know where these people think the money's coming from. They seem to provide the worst service in the country, and they're putting their rates up through the roof. We just had a 7.5% increase in rate. So now we're getting another increase in rate. So, your fixed cost is just going through the roof. You've got to put your wages up for your employees. Not that they need a wage rise, because they've got increased expenses to pay for. Their rates are up, their rent is up, their operating expenses are up, and that's what happens, even if your revenue doesn't change or your revenue stays the same or increases, your cost is not going down. And as a result of this, you will see reduced profit. Once cost goes up, it just doesn't go backwards. It's never happened. You know, 10 years ago, you could buy a bottle of Coke and a pie for $3. Now, a Coke and a pie is $12. It will never go back to $3. We'll never see that in our lifetime anymore, you know. So that's what's happening. 10 years prior to that, 20 years ago, I used to see the price of pies were $1 or 95 cents. After school, all the kids would go out and eat a pie because they were 95 cents. Um, so that's what's happening. The cost has never gone backwards. So whatever increases we're seeing now, our rates are not going to go down. Our insurance are not going down. Our insurance is up 900% over 20 years. It's up 900%. That's not going to go down because the insurance companies are smart. They know the cost of building your houses are expensive or cost of replacing your car. As a result, right? As a result of this, we have reduced profit, meaning less cash in our pocket, and that's why everyone is feeling the squeeze. Um, the other major factor that even if you don't have any borrowings, even if you have a business and it's got no borrowings at all, but your customers have borrowings, our interest rates are going up. So they're having less money to spend. And as a result, we see retailers are struggling. Most businesses are saying there's less customer spending now. And it's just quite sad. And also, what we've noticed in the market, the current trend is people are fixing for 3, 4, 5 years. Um, People with really good cash flow, investors with really good cash flow, businesses with really good cash flow are fixing their loans for 5 years because they're just looking at so many uncertainties that they would like to have 5 years. I've fixed some of my loan for 5 years because I just couldn't be bothered with all this. Yes, there's a war, there's not a war, there's a war, there's not a war. All of that scenarios in my head. So I just fixed my loan for 5 years and forget about it.
When
But
it's
I,
one of your major costs too, that's it's certainty of cash flow for an extended period of time.
yes, yes, and people are fixing for 3, 4 years as well.
Mm.
These are people that can take a little bit more risk, but it is your major cost. And like I said, even if you are debt free, your customers are not debt free. It's a cost to everyone. Literally every Kiwi gets impacted when interest cost goes through the roof. And then IID is out of patience now. They're not listening to your COVID story. If you default on your payment plan, they look at winding you up immediately, or they don't allow you on another payment plan. IID has become really hard to deal with. And fair call. I mean, if they've given you, 2, 3 years to pay this debt off, you haven't. They've lost their patience and they're coming after you. So very important. If you are going to default to IID, you give them a call, talk to them, or get hold of your accountant and get your accountant to talk to the IID. So that's what's happening out there. So this is why we can see massive cost and cash flow issues out there. Um, so this is some of the ways that you can improve your cash flow. We as a team, we talk about it and we promote this with our client. Something that Anthony and I do is Anthony and I do daily workflow meetings. So we understand what work we're going to bill out and what we have to do. I know a lot of businesses out there that do really well. They do weekly cash flow forecast where the owners keep an eye on the weekly cash flow and what's happening every week, which week's going to be hard for them. So they're ready. If they need to go to the bank for funding their particular week, they write up to the banks upfront and say, we will need extended overdraft during this period. So it's really important you start running your weekly cash flow forecast. Now, this doesn't mean it only applies to businesses. It can apply to mum and dad. If you're earning your normal PAYE salary, you can look at that. Or if you're a property investor, you can look at when your rates are coming in, when your insurances are due, things like that. So very important to run a weekly cash flow forecast during a downturn, so you keep an eye on every single dollar if you're very tight on cash. Um, Again, I touched on this earlier, reprice inflation. If inflation is coming in, your product prices are going up, and you haven't changed your price, your selling price, same as 2 years ago, same as 3 years ago, well, I'm sorry, mate, you're going to be losing money, because you are paying for it. And, why should you pay for it? Because, suddenly, for example, the cost of providing the good was $100 and you were selling it for 150, you're making $50. Now, if the cost of providing the good is $135 and you're still charging 150, well, you're paying that $35, the increase in cost. So you need to put your price up. And if you say to me, no, no, I can't put my price up, I'll lose my customers. Well, go and see what your competition's doing because they're putting their price up because they know that's a real cost to them. So you have to put your price up if you get warnings from your suppliers that your cost is going up. It's like we get a warning from the banks, right? Hey, your interest rate is coming off from 2.9% to 5.9% now, right? What do? We make sure there's more money in the bank account to pay the interest costs, right? It's the same thing here. If you get a notification, your cost of goods are going up, you pass it on to your clients. Get paid faster. Now, this is something that I promote a lot within my client base. I say to them, have a 7 day invoice period. Like within 7 days, try and get paid. Now, I know as businesses, we're used to getting paid on the 20th. Now, there was just someone came up with the rule from the 1950s, and people have stuck to it.
Yeah.
But it's not a written rule that you got to be paid on every 20th. Imagine going to Countdown and saying, mate, I'm going to pay you on the 20th for my grocery. They'll show you the door out, right? So you create your own destiny here. You either get paid on delivery, right, or reduce your payment days to 7 days. Most Kiwi businesses they've got wages to pay every week, so you want to be paid within 7 days, and if they're one day late, get on the phone, start screaming and yelling because you need to be paid. Don't wait for 60 days. Don't wait for 90 days. We've seen so many of our clients do that. Because if you're going to do that, well, you're funding your clients because now you have to use your overdraft, right? So if your clients are going to pay you in 60 or 90 days, well, you charge them the interest rate. Simple as that. They've got to pay the cost to provide you so you can provide them a credit for 60 or 90 days. Um, so really important, guys, keep an eye on your invoices. Make sure the customers are paying. Now, very important, if you are going to default to the IRD, right, you need to call them and tell them that you're going to default and you're going to put a payment plan in. Don't default and then call the IRD because you get an immediate penalty, which is about 5% on the first or second day of the default. It's a lot of money. So,
Yeah. Yeah,
do you agree?
1% first day and then 5% after a week, I think. So it only takes a week and suddenly 6% penalty instantly on the core tax amount.
Yeah. And all you needed to do is get on the phone or email us and we'll get on the phone with the ID and put a payment plan in. The other company that we get people to use if they're defaulting or they're behind on their tax is use text pulling because you don't get penalized for using text pulling. If you don't understand what text pulling is, give us a call or email us and we'll guide you through. So you can defer your tax payment. We're talking about tax payment here, not GST or PAYE. You can defer your tax payment, but we need to work out when do you need to pay this by. Um, Also, you got to look at reducing your overheads. The amount of clients that I've met, they've got four company cars, they only need two. Sell it, guys. If you've got extra assets, sell it, pay off the debt down. There's no point in having extra company cars. I know you're busy, but get rid of assets you're not using to generate income. Unused assets, that just cost you a fortune. Get rid of it. I'm bad at doing this. I've got so many cars, and it's just waste of money, complete waste of money. If you've got extra floor space, sublease it. Sublease it. Why wouldn't you want your lease to be discounted by 50% if you don't need to use it? Sublease it and you'll have a business sharing the cost. Staff reduction. So if you've got surplus staff, you don't need them. You can help them find another job with your suppliers or your business associates or employ them in other divisions, where they can be more productive. And you kind of see all this when things get hard. You kind of work this out, who's working hard, who's not working hard in terms of employee. And you can, and it's not their fault they're not working hard. You just haven't guided them through. So it's very important you get a control of that. And the last point we talk about is know your break-even point, guys. You need to know what your sales every week needs to be so you can keep your doors open, right? Once you know that, then you're protected. That break-even points includes we're talking about your cash flow, your loan repayments, everything. What number you need to sell to make sure everyone gets paid, employees, supplies, your rent gets paid, and your mortgage gets paid, everything. So that's your break-even point. Once you work that out, you always make sure that the team is selling at break-even point. Well, that's the start off. They need to be there. Now, Anthony is a bit of AI guru, so I'm going to let him talk
Yeah.
about AI. There you go,
Cool.
Anthony.
Thanks.
You
Thanks.
tell us about AI.
Thanks, Sal. Right. So AI, depending on who you listen to, it's either going to run your business for you or replace you entirely. But honestly, both narratives are probably a bit exhausting. So we'll put the hype and the doom to one side and look at where New Zealand businesses actually are, because the local numbers tell a pretty interesting story. So the first number on the screen there, 82% of New Zealand businesses are already using AI in some form. So if you're sitting there thinking you're behind, you might not be unless you're absolutely not using it at all. And here's the catch, that for most of that 82%, using AI probably just means using the summarize button in their email or the draft this feature in Word. But it's the features that come bundled into software that's already owned that they're using. And that's useful, but it's pretty shallow, and it makes existing processes slightly faster, but it doesn't necessarily change the business. So the second number there, 13%, that's how many businesses have an actual AI policy. So if you think about what that means, nearly every business is using these tools, but almost none of them have any particular rules internally about it. So right now, someone on your team might be pasting something into a chatbot, and if nobody's told them what is or isn't allowed, it could be a customer's personal details or your pricing or a supplier contract. And that's not a reason to panic, but it's a reason to spend an hour or so writing some rules. And we'll come back to that in the next slide. So then the number that should really get your attention is $400,000. So Deloitte and 2 Degrees looked at this last year, and they found the average small to medium business using AI properly earned around $400,000 more in the last financial year than a comparable business that wasn't using it. Now, I'm guessing that's probably more the medium business than the small business, that 400 grand, but everybody wants a slice of that, right? And of course, that kind of difference won't be simply from that summarize button. That gap comes from businesses that have actually redesigned how work or workflow gets done, or how quotes get produced, how customer inquiry gets handled from like the first phone call through to the final invoice. But even a fraction of that number is worth having to hit your bottom line. And I'll say this from our own experience too at GRA. We use these tools every day in our practice now. Work that used to take a couple of hours, like drafting documents or pulling together file notes, gets done in minutes with a human checking it, of course. And that time that you save goes back into work that actually needs a brain and work that produces that extra money. So the way I look at it, I guess, and it's the bottom line of that slide, is the real risk isn't AI taking your job or your business. It's a competitor using it better than you do. So two businesses in the same town, the same trade, the same costs. One of them turns quotes around the same afternoon because AI drafts it for them first, and the other takes 3 days. So guess who wins the customer? So threat or tool, it's definitely a tool, but like any tool, the value depends on what you do with it. So let's look at some practical things around that, which will be on the next slide. If you could switch over, Sal. Thank you. So how do you actually capture some of that value without it turning into a full-blown science project? So we've got three columns on the slide. There's some quick wins, operational uses, and some guardrails. And the one sentence that matters more than anything else at the top there is that the gains come from redesigning how the work done's, not necessarily just bolting on a chatbot to an unchanged process. But if you do want to bolt on the chatbot, there are some quick wins in that left-hand column, and I think I do most of these things daily through Claude or ChatGPT. And these are things you could start this month, even this week, with tools that cost you, like as much as $50 a month or less to get a commercial or private access to some of those large language models. So drafting emails, quotes and proposals, Instead of staring at a blank page, you just dictate the rough facts and get a solid first draft in 30 seconds. Meeting notes and file summaries. So you record the meeting, or the AI does, and then you get a summary with action notes and action points instantly after the meeting. Marketing content, social posts, first drafts of job ads, staff policies, procedures. So if you notice the pattern with this, everything in this column is a first draft. The tool does the blank page work, but a human does the judgment. So if you take nothing else from this AI section tonight, pick one of these and try it tomorrow. Honestly, if you're in the minority that haven't tried it, you won't believe how easy and powerful these large language models are, such as ChatGPT and Claude. I was speaking to a lawyer the other day who writes, complex legal agreements, and he was discussing how even the first drafts that come out now of these AI models can be near perfect these days. So then the middle column is the operational stuff. This is probably where the real money is. It takes a bit more of a setup. So think of this as a do it a few times a year project, rather than it's going to be something that you're going to get off this webinar and get straight into. But things like triaging customer inquiries so that routine questions get answered instantly, but only genuine ones reach a human. Cash flow and sales forecasting. So Sal talked earlier about running a weekly cash flow. Well, AI makes maintaining that like dramatically less painful. Like you'd be amazed how well it'll take your information and spit out a cash flow based on the next few weeks. You jump in and you have a quick look and you make sure it looks all right, but it's really powerful. So comparing documents, supplier quotes, contracts, terms of trade, and automating repetitive admin that shuffles information between your systems. And this is the column where you go from saving minutes to saving hours. So then the right-hand column is the guardrails, and don't skip this bit, because this is where the 13% statistic from the last slide comes home to roost. So I think 3 rules we've got there is, firstly, have a policy, what's allowed, what's not. Number 2, never paste sensitive client data into public tools. You can have a public access to an AI, and a lot of what you drop in there is something that AI learns off. But when you've got a private account and a corporate account, then it silos that off. Obviously, very important. So the business grade versions of these tools don't train on your data. And then finally, and certainly extremely important for here at GRA, but also really for everyone, is that a human has to review everything that goes out the door, right? AI is brilliant at being a first drafter, but it's also a very confident liar. It will occasionally state something wrong with absolute total conviction. And if that goes to a customer under your letterhead, that's your reputation, not the software's. So with AI, how do you actually start? Well, at the bottom of the slide, don't try and do everything all at once. If you're just getting into it, pick one painful, repetitive process. The thing that your team or your clients whinge about the most. Fix that one end to end, and then move on to the next. And after a while, you'll start building an advantage. And hopefully, you're building that advantage while your competitors are still arguing about whether or not AI is still just a fad. So in regards to advantage, clients, bringing on new clients, let's jump back now to you, Sal, on how to look at winning new clients in a tight economic market.
Talking about AI, I'm with Anthony here. The amount of time you save is just next level. So things that I'm not talking about you as the business owner. I'm talking about your admin staff. They can go faster, and sometimes you have to force it. I've heard of companies where if they don't use AI, their computers are monitored, and their HR team will come down and talk to the staff for not using it, which is smart, right? Why are you taking 10 hours to do something when you could have done an hour? and moved on to something else.
Yeah, you've got to champion that change, eh? You've got to be like really make because people will just do what they're used to. They'll do what they're comfortable with, right?
Yes.
You've really got to help them, encourage them, champion them, tell them what the positives are, and once they start getting into it and seeing how much time they save, how much quicker they can get their work done, how much better their work looks,
Yeah.
how much better they look because of how efficient they are, how good the work is, then they really start picking it up and running with it.
Yeah. I've got a good friend who flies to America to see a couple of billionaires. So these guys have a couple of businesses, and she'll fly all the way from here. And she was telling me before AI came in, she had to prep up and do all this reporting for them. And now when she shows up, the owners of the company go, "Where is the AI report?" They're not interested in what she's doing. All they want to know is, how is she? Where's the AI report? Give us the AI report, because that's more accurate to them than anything else. So she said within 3 hours, the meeting's over. And then, she gets to literally enjoy the next 5 days and then fly back, and they want her to do that because AI is so accurate in terms of what's it offering. But one of the things that I want to talk about is winning clients and when they're spending less money as well. What do you look out for? I mean, I get fascinated with clients telling me, how much they are working on business owners that they want new clients, new clients, new clients. But it's so hard to get a new client when people are not spending money. So what you got to do is you got to really look after your existing clients. The retention of existing client, or calling them and asking them for any additional work, they'll give it to you. And then referrals, when they send you referrals, you give them something in return, because that's what businesses want to do. When they refer someone, they want to be looked after. You should look after, and then you do add-on services, what extra services you can put in. But the existing clients are so important, guys. You got to really focus on looking after them. Then you've got business to business referrals, right? That's another one that's super important. We as a chartered accounting firm, we get a lot of referrals with bankers, some of the large companies in the industry. They send us a lot of clients because we do have a quality reputation. And what they look at is, like, okay, we're going to refer our client to GRA. Are they going to do a good job? Yes. So they'll refer us the clients. So very important that if you've got businesses referring you clients, you look after them. And some of your big clients might come out of business to business referral. And it's one of the most cost-effective way to get clients, you know, and you reward the businesses that send you clients. You send them something. You could put a rebate in place, or you take those owners out once a month out for dinner and get them drunk. That's the kind of stuff that people want. They want to be looked after. Or go out for lunch, a boozy lunch. There's nothing wrong with that. Because yes, you sacrifice 4 hours of your time. In return, they supply you 5 clients. Look after these people, you know. One of the things I've noticed, especially it happens with me, if you promise a client something and you promise a delivery date, be a man of your word. Very important. I always run into people in my property business where they've promised me the world and it doesn't get delivered. And so it's very important. If you've told a client, we'll get your work done by this Friday, 4 p.m., the work must be done and delivered. And then the client loves you, they refer you to other clients. When you promise them the work is going to be done by this Friday, but it gets done next month on a Friday, well, put it this way, they'll never use you again and they'll never send you a client. And if you can't deliver the work this Friday that you've promised, give them a call and tell them why you can't deliver it. If you've overpromised, well, then say, sorry, I overpromised to you. I'll get it done by Monday or Tuesday, but make sure you get it done. So we get this all the time, and it's a result. Businesses lose clients. Or the owners are too busy doing their own thing. They're relying on their employees to get it right. So you got to keep an eye on this thing's really important. you know, and then own your own channels. Send clients email lists advertising your products. Very important. Clients love it. Social media is important. You've got to be on social media because you look at what people do in their spare time. They're surfing through the net. So if you're a lawn mowing business, they're surfing through the net. All Strevens they're doing lawn mowing. So they go tick, tick, tick. And they like that, because you're on their face, you're always around, they like it. And then one of the things that while we were obviously putting this together, we've read a report where roughly two-thirds of ANZ small businesses are increasing their marketing spend in 2026 to acquire more customers, right? But only half of them are getting there. It's not easy to get new customers, but the reason you want to keep marketing is because if your client sees you all the time, they can see you marketing and promoting yourself. They won't bother changing providers. So really important you understand that. So marketing is really important because yes, it does cost money, but it goes into getting new clients and also keeping your existing client in place. So marketing is really important. And not even that. When your existing clients sees your marketing, they refer it to their mates. You end up getting more work. So winning clients is very important. It's really hard to get new clients at the moment, especially when clients are not spending money. So it's really hard. But put a big effort into maintaining your existing clients or your supply chain who are supplying your clients. Very important, guys. Anthony, do you have anything to add to that?
I was talking to a client just the other day actually, and I was surprised to see that they were bucking the trend. Sales were up. They were doing really well. It was year ended 31 March 26 that we were looking at, and marketing and advertising spend was sort of doubled on the prior year, and I was like, wow, you guys are really in a down market, aggressively advertising and marketing. And now I'm not saying to everybody go out and drop an extra 20 or 40 grand on advertising and marketing if you don't have the right channels or the right message or the right way to do it. It's not instantly going to work out, but these guys are doing it well. And they're grabbing market share. And they're grabbing market share, I guess, when other people are potentially because of their reduction in profitability, are reducing their discretionary spend on marketing and advertising. So that was quite interesting to see that kind of counterintuitive thing, that rather than reducing costs, they increase this quite aggressively, and it's been quite successful for them.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I've seen some businesses in GFC advertise. I was a graduate, and man, they grew. They probably, grew to be the industry leaders. So I believe in that. So Anthony, what do you think about hiring and keeping good people?
Cool. Well, in a tight market, getting this wrong is certainly one of the most expensive mistakes that a small business can make. And getting it right is one of the cheapest advantages available, I suppose. And that big number on the right there is a scary one, right? If you get it wrong, then your cost is 1 to 3 times the annual salary. That's the common estimate. I'm not sure where from, but I've heard it a few times before, that's for sure. So let's stack that up though. So recruitment, the advertising, the agency fee, your time doing interviews, training, months of your best people's time going into someone who ultimately doesn't work out, lost output, the work that didn't get done or got done badly, or even worse, the one bad mistake with a customer's cost. One bad mistake with a customer might cost more than the salary itself. So on a $70,000 role, you're looking between 70 and 210 grand for not getting it right. And in a year when margins are already squeezed, that's not an HR problem. That's a cash flow crisis, right? So 4 ways here to improve your process. So firstly, hire slow. Structure beats gut feel. For most small businesses, hiring might be a coffee style interview. The fix is boring, but it works. A scorecard of what the role requires, maybe a small work sample, get them to actually do a slice of the job. Reference checks, actually check them genuinely, not just collect, and that little bit of a process is the cheapest insurance you can buy. And I've got a client that reasonably a few years ago now, but had a nightmare situation with an employee that they basically hired on the fact that they had gone to the same school they did. Like that sort of school connections. Like, he went to my school. Yeah, I'm going to hire this guy. Like nothing other than that. In the end, it resulted in stolen IP, stolen clients, absolute nightmare. And then the cost to try and get anything back out of that situation through legal channels, that was actually almost prohibitive. So even though you might have some recourse against this stuff, it still costs to go through that process. So, second one there, and many people I think underestimate this one, and that's onboarding. So having an onboarding process. So a lot of what we end up writing off as bad hires is actually good people who maybe got bad onboarding. They show up, nothing's ready. There's no plan. 3 months later, everyone's frustrated, you know. Um, a written 90-day plan of what your job should look like at 30, 60, 90 days, you know, here's what we expect, here's what the deliverables are. That roughly doubles your odds of keeping the good ones. And, it costs you an hour to write. Or if you use AI, it probably costs you 3 minutes to write. um, then looking at, retention is cheaper than recruitment, right? So every dollar and every hour you spend keeping a good person is worth several spent replacing them. And the key word is before. So pay attention beforehand, regular one on ones, honest pay reviews, some flexibility, a genuine pathway forward, discussing what their goals are, what they're trying to achieve. By the time your best person hands you a resignation letter, you're negotiating from the back foot. And even if your counteroffer works, you've usually just delayed the departure. And finally, really much more relevant in this day and age, can you buy the skill rather than hiring it? Before you commit to a permanent salary that your cash flow has to carry every single month, regardless of whether there's work there or not, ask yourself whether a contractor or a part-timer, offshore support, or frankly, even the AI workflows we just talked about could cover the gap. Permanent hires are a wonderful thing when the demand is proven, but until then, flexibility is your friend in this current economy. So basically, deliberate beats desperate. The business that treats hiring and retention as a system and not an emergency are the ones holding on to good people. And while their competitors might be paying 1 to 3 times the salary to learn this lesson the hard way. So should we jump now to taking a look at the banks and the banking?
Yes.
Something very close to Salesh's heart is getting money out of lenders. So we'll leave it to him to take you through this next slide.
Well, like I said earlier, bank is your lifeline in business, your personal line, everything. You're married to your bank. They've got all your details, all your data. What do you spend your money on? Everything. What your savings are, what your collections going to be. Everything they know about you. So it's really important, guys. Best thing is, and which is one of my points down here is make friends with your bank. You know, don't be rude to your bank. That's so important. I see so many clients being rude to the bank because what happens is the bank has put a note in there, this person's rude, and they all work towards walking you out of the banks. So you need the bankers more than the bankers needs you, right? Very important. If you want cheap rates, you want bank fees waived, everything else, look after your bankers. Very important, you know. So what happens is like when in a tight market, what can the banks do for you? They can look at putting interest only periods in, instead of paying principal and interest. If you're struggling, they can go interest only. They can even give you a mortgage holiday for 3 months to recover. They can also give you working capital or overdraft facilities in place to get you through during hard times of cash flow because your customers might be struggling. They're not paying on time. So the banks can come in and say, okay, we'll give you the cash flow. We'll run it for you. They can also refinance, you can refinance your rollover lending, so if your loan's coming off fixed, you can look at refinancing it to another bank or negotiating a better rate. They can also do funding against your property, to give you some working capital to help you in your business, or they can provide you debtor finance, so you've been billing out, you need the money up front, they can give you debtor finance. Yes, it's slightly expensive, but it actually solves the problem. Um, Very important as well is how to ask a bank and get a yes. If you've got issues with your banking or your cash flow, you need to go in early, and say, dear Mr. Banker, what's going to happen is on the fourth week, I'm going to start struggling with cash flow because clients are not going to pay, or I've got massive tax bills coming up and GST and all of that. So if you go in there early and you've done your weekly cash flow, with an honest opinion or position and a plan in place, well, put it this way, the banks are going to sign that off and give you that temporary overdraft. But if you present the bank with surprises, i.e., you need the money tomorrow and you've approached them today, well, it's a very hard push. You might get a decline. So make sure you've given the banks plenty of warning if you need temporary overdraft put in or extended overdraft. Also, with any bank, you must have a good accountant. GRA has one of the best reputations in the banking industry, because we employ, you can ask Anthony as well. We have over 40 chartered accountants, and over 10 public practitioners working here. So very important. The bank relies on our license to approve your loan. So we have to do the right thing by the bank and by the client. So we have a good reputation in the market. So we'll obviously review your affairs. And if we can see, yes, you need some funds in place, we're happy to sign that off for the banks. So you need good accountants in place, and I reckon GRA probably one of the best in the market. Now you've also got to look at your credit rating. I know there's a lot of debt owing to IRD, a lot of businesses are behind, and it's not their fault. They've got behind, for whatever reason. But I've also noticed lately that IRD are pushing some of this debt to collection companies. So you haven't paid, it gets registered with the collection companies, it pops up on the credit rating. So be very careful with this. If you do owe money to IRD, let's put a payment plan in, or let's negotiate a settlement with the IRD. And if you don't know how to do this, approach us and we'll help you through the process. One of the other things I've noticed lately is the banks are working really hard in terms of trying to get new business as clients. They do anything and they're offering some massive cashbacks, to attract you over to a new bank. So if you're not happy with your bank, if your bank's not helping you, you're coming off some of your fixed terms, go out there and go shopping. There's no harm. It doesn't cost any money. Go get your mortgage brokers involved and see what kind of rates and cashbacks you can get. If you get 20 or 30 grand, why not? It's free money. Take it and run. And as I was saying earlier, make friends with your banks. Do not make them your enemy. They're there. They're going to provide you a 24-hour service. Look after them. Now, let's say the banks don't decide not to fund you or look after you. You've also got second-tier lenders, and there's some amazing cheap rates out there with second-tier lenders who are doing 30-year mortgage terms. And GRA is well connected to some of the second-tier lenders through Chris Peterson Mortgages, or they're known as KPM. So if you didn't need some second-tier lenders, feel free to get a hold of us, or feel free to give Chris Peterson Mortgages a call, and they'll set that up for you. But this is some of the things you can do to protect your banking, your cash flow, right? The closer you are to your bank, the easier your life is going to be, right? Look after your bankers and your life will be easy, So really important. I think this is one of the main topics. You use your banking every day. You want to make sure you're looked after by a bank. Now, guys, Anthony's going to talk about bottom line and, how to improve things. Anthony?
Yeah, cool. Well, actually, more of a summary slide, the bottom line of some of the stuff that we've talked through so far, and what we've discussed here tonight together, because we've covered quite a bit of ground. Costs, cash flow, AI, winning clients, hiring people, the bank, and here's some of the ones to focus on. So know your numbers weekly, right? So not annually, weekly. One-page cash flow forecast that you actually look at every Monday beats the most beautiful set of annual accounts that you read 4 months after the year has ended. The businesses navigating this economy well aren't necessarily smarter or luckier. They just see problems 6 weeks out instead of 6 days out. And that's a significant difference. It changes the conversation with your bank, it changes the conversation with the IRD, and it changes how well you sleep. So perhaps that's job number 1 for this week. Number 2, act early. And this applies to everything we've talked about. Tax arrears, a facility rolling over, a cost that needs cutting, a hire that isn't working. Every single option shrinks with delay. So IRD, they'll do an installment arrangement with a business that fronts up early. They'll liquidate one that goes quiet. The banks will fund a forecast, but they'll decline a surprise. There's no problem we've discussed tonight that gets cheaper by waiting. And Salesh and I have both seen the same story too many times. The difference between a rough year and losing the business often comes down to nothing more than how early someone picked up the phone and asked for a bit of help or got on the front foot. Third point there, using the tools, and I mean that broadly. So AI, which we've talked about, gap between business using it properly and the ones ignoring it is opening up. Your bank, which, as Salesh has showed you, can do far more than most owners ever really ask of it. And of course, your advisors. Your accountant should be part of your decision making during the year, not just the person who tells you what happened after it's over. That's where you're going to get some value out of your accountant. So get on the front foot and get in touch. None of these tools care about how big your business is. Leverage is leverage. So, and finally, position yourself for the upturn. Slow economies reward the well organized. Every downturn in history has ended, and this one will too. Inflation is forecast to keep easing as long as the bombs eventually stop dropping and ships can get back to shipping. Interest rates are near the bottom of the cycle, and the clean out, which we talked about way back at the beginning, as brutal as it's been, is potentially thinning out your competition, which means market share is being given up right now, and somebody needs to grab that market share. The businesses that spend this period getting their numbers tight and their pricing right, their people sorted and their tools working, they're the ones who will come out firing from the downturn. Cool. So I think we've still, yeah, that's right. We've still got a bit more there. So hand it back to Salesh for a look at what to do if you're really struggling.
What if you're really struggling out there, and things are getting hard. So like Anthony said, your one page, report what's cash on your hand, what's owed to you, what do you owe people. Just a quick statement of position. Now, you wouldn't believe this. I don't know if I've ever told Anthony. I update my statement of position literally every third day. And I update my cash position to see how many business cash I've got in what businesses. As of today, I know I've got close to $5.5 million working capital available to me, and that's what I do every day to keep an eye on it. And I've got, we've got GRA, but I've also got a couple of, businesses that require massive capital. We go in building houses, then we sell them, we release our cash flow. Funnily, we've been selling all our stock. It's completely against what the news is saying. As soon as our product is ready, our houses are built, we've got our CCC, boom, all the stock is out the door. So we're selling them. So very important, you get that one page. Mine is one page. It's no longer than one page. It just tells me all my assets, my cash flow and everything, and then I just look at it and keep going. And what I do is I measure my cash flow by comparing it to my bank statement every day. You always talk before you're talked to. Now, what this means is if you are going to default to the banks or to the ID, you give them a gentle call, have a good yarn, and say, look, I'm going to default. We're going to put a payment plan in and all of that. Now, what that avoids is a bad credit against you, or known as a bad person, or helps you with the banks as well. Because you might ring the bank and say, I'm going to default. The bank might go, I'll put a temporary $50,000 overdraft in. So you don't get a default recorded against your name. With the ID, if you tell them that I'm going to pay you, I'm going to default, but I'm going to pay you through tax credits, they'll put a note in the system. So really important. You get on the front foot here and sort yourself out before you start getting warning letters. So you also know your formal options. That's number point three, So you know what creditor compromise is. If you really know you can't pay your creditors, come and see us. We get on the phone. We start putting restructure planning in. We start talking to creditors and see what we can do for you. Maybe they'll buy 10 cents in every dollar, and we get on with it. If we have to go into voluntary liquidation, so be it. Don't be shy. It is what it is, we can help you with that. There's all these other things we can do, like protect your family home so no one touches your family home. That's important because you need a roof. You need it for the family and for the kids. Very important. One thing I'm going to tell you, never put your family home up for guarantee for business purposes. So if your supplier wants to put a guarantee on your family home, say no. Sorry, I'm not going to deal with you if you're going to put a guarantee on my family home. You can get a personal guarantee and you can get a guarantee from the business, but you're not taking guarantee over my home, because what happens is if you do that and you get into trouble, they'll mortgage you, sell your house. Watch for your personal exposure. exposure. Very important. If you are PAYE, guys, that's the first tax you should clear. PAYE and KiwiSaver, because it's not your money, right? You got to clear that. That's considered stealing, and you can get done for that. And then GST gets paid and income tax, right? Very important. And also, you don't want to be trading while you're insolvent because you can get in trouble as the director of the company, and you'll have a government department called MBIE approach you, and you don't want that, right? Because you've got so many. As a result, you have to hire lawyers and fight to make sure you don't get done for that. So this is some of the advice we can give you, and we've seen things happen over time, and some of the help we can provide you with. Now, let's say you have recovered and you're doing well. Always build a buffer, guys. Always have enough cash flow in place. Like I was saying to you guys earlier, between all the businesses, I've access to about 5.5 million working capital, and that's so I can have control of my own destiny. I know where to invest or what to do at the right time. Make sure all the bills are paid. Um, what you got to do is make sure IID is paid. One of the worst debt you can ever have is with the IID because managers charge you interest and penalties willy-nilly. And not even that, they keep accumulating and keep charging on the new numbers. So your interest and penalties just get bigger and bigger. So whatever you do, try and sort out IID or clear any short-term debt you've got. You got to get the right structures in, guys. This is really important. If you've got a really good business, let's protect the business by putting it into a trust, separate trust, and a separate trust for your family home. What you don't want is your business and your family home to sit in the same trust because you might end up giving guarantee as a shareholder to your creditors, which means the creditors have access to your family home, right? So very important. We try and separate them out, especially if you're signing long-term lease. It's a very cheap structure to set up because it's designed to protect you, and hopefully you never have to use it. But if you do, you have to use it. It's there to protect you. One of the things we encourage at GRA is for our clients to invest in properties. If your business is doing well, and everything's going well, we encourage our clients to park your profit and your extra income into properties and pay your debt down over a certain time. Now, the advantage is if you have tough times coming, you can refinance and release equity, or you can sell the property and release some equity. Or if you're getting old, you're ready to retire, just sell all the portfolio and retire. You've got a massive cash flow. So we encourage property investing. And also you reinvest in the engine like Anthony's talking about. You got AI capabilities. You can invest in sharp pricing systems and anything like that. So it's very important that you reinvest into your business that makes things more effective. Now we're just about to finish the presentation, so please get your questions ready. And here's our little slide. If you do want to book an appointment with us, please scan the QR code, fill out the form, and Amy will get hold of you and book you in with one of us. Now, looks like we haven't got any questions. Oh, no, we do have questions coming in. Is there a magic formula of how much cash we should have in hand in tough times? Well, I personally think you should have 10% of your total portfolio. Let's say your total portfolio is $1 million. Your business, your family home, and everything's $1 million. You must have access to $100,000 cash somewhere, either in savings or in overdraft facilities, including credit card, right? So that's what I always work towards is having 10% cash available,
Yeah.
Do you agree with that, Anthony?
Yeah, I think also I think what you hear bandied around a little bit is the concept of having about like 3 to 6 months of fixed operating costs, from a business sort of thing. So if you're able to cover your overheads, fixed overheads for 3 to 6 months, because obviously this is different for everyone. It depends how big you are, how much what your annual costs are as to how much you need to have aside, because that's not going to be a fixed number for everyone. But maybe you could use the 3 to 6 months formula of operating or overheads as a benchmark for what you should have set aside to cover you in difficult times.
Absolutely, absolutely. Very, very, and like it doesn't have to be hardcore cash, right? We talked about overdraft facility or credit cards.
Yeah,
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 you can do things like that.
That's the ideal too, because then you don't have cash sitting around doing nothing.
Yeah. Here's another question we got from Jesse. Hey guys, which banks are you finding the easiest to deal with currently? Being with ANZ for 30 years and they are being painful. Um, to be honest, the best bank that I'm finding at the moment, the ones that I work well with, is ASB, BNZ, and QBank. For some reason, QBank is out there supporting businesses like anything. So those are the three banks that I find quite easy to work with. What about you, Anthony? Which banks are you seeing out there?
Yeah, I think it changes, doesn't it? And I hate to say it, but I feel like the bank that's going to be the most difficult is the one you're probably with because you're a current customer rather than a prospective new customer. You know, banks are always very generous to prospective new customers that want to bring their business to them, but aren't so good at keeping their own customers. Um, yeah,
Well, that's how the employees are paid, isn't it?
yeah, that's
Paid
right.
on annual.
It's incentives around sales culture. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So there's no harm, Jesse, if I were you, going out and hunting
yeah,
for new business because you can really do well. But put it this way, if you've got a bank that looks after you, don't need to leave them, But also what we can do is we can refer you, Jesse, if you email us, we can refer you to some of the brokers who can go out and hunt you a new bank. And you can interview your bankers. If you don't like them, you don't have to go on with them. We got Alexander here. Can you say more about keeping the business separate from your trust? My trust owns 99 over 100 shares in my business. Right. So, very good question here, guys. I know I was talking really fast because something went through my throat at that point. Now, what I said is if you have a business, you have your business ownership in a separate trust and not in a trust that owns your family home. And the reason why I said that is because you might go and sign a lease agreement for 10 years. And in the lease agreement, it says the shareholder provide us guarantee. But the shareholder is a trust. If the shareholder provides guarantee to the landlord and you default your rent, right, your business rent, they have the right to sell your family home because you've provided them guarantee over your family home. This is what happens, right? And so if you go into an empty trust, if you had an empty trust, say Alexandra Trust was an empty trust, you could have that trust own your business. And yes, it's provided guarantee, but the trust is empty. So they can't get into your family home because your family home is owned by ABC Trust, completely different. So I'm always up for second trust to run a business from, always. You know, it's cheap to set up a trust. It's expensive to fight a landlord. To fight a landlord if you're trying to get out at least 7 years before it's due. You probably can look at several $100,000 to get out of the lease. Whereas to set up a new trust is 3 grand.
yeah,
And it's
that's
really
right.
not.
That's right. And people will often say, like, I mean, someone might get to the end of their like an investment life cycle. So I'm talking about people retiring. They say, "Oh, Anthony, I never needed those trusts." And I say, "Brilliant. That's so good. I'm so glad you never needed those trusts. That
Yeah.
means that means nothing bad happened, But the people that did need the trusts sure are glad they got them set up."
So, guys, very important. Those are some of the things we can help you with. And, we obviously have done the presentation for free because we like to share ideas and we like to get your ideas as well. Hopefully, the presentation was informative. Now, obviously, this is just a presentation to provide you with network. So, if you need any of the network or connections, email Amy. If you need to book a meeting, email Amy. Oh, yeah, I forgot to tell you that if you do book a meeting, we'll throw a prize in. Maybe you go out for lunch with Anthony Strevens, you know.
Yeah.
So whoever fills the forms out, we'll get a chance to go out for lunch with Anthony Strevens, go and spend a couple of hours with Anthony drinking wine and everything else. Very
In the
important.
drawer. In the drawer. That's right.
And
Yeah.
that's in the drawer, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Nice.
yeah, Anthony will look after you. But yeah, guys, always like to give you a prize back. So fill out the form. Look, you might not need us. Oh, one more thing before I go. So it's still got about 42 people here, guys. Um, if you've got a business and if you have a family home and you got non-deductibility interest, now non-deductibility interest is what that means is if you spend 100,000 a year on your interest payment, you get no tax back. That 100,000 is your payment, right? But if you can get a deduction on the $100,000, and let's say your tax rate was 39%, right? Which means now your interest cost reduces by 39%. 100,000 minus $39,000, because now you've got a tax benefit. So the interest cost is 61,000. So we can look at ways of looking at interest deductibility. Um, if you are looking at interest deductibility on your loan, we can help you with that. That saves you a lot of money. And why wouldn't you want us to look at that, you know? Because sometimes clients have massive current account balances they haven't utilized, you know, and which is the benefit you're missing out by not talking to someone like Anthony or I. So if you do want us to look at that, get hold of us. We'll make it happen, you know. How do you feel if you're paying $100,000 a year in interest and you got $39,000 back, you know? We'd surely deserve a night out, you know, on good whiskey and good wine, you know. But that's the beauty of working with a family like this. We can identify things that can work better for you from a tax perspective. Now, thank you guys. Have a good night.
Thanks, Sal.
No worries. Thank you. See you. Bye.